This video is brought to you by DistroKid. Get 7% off your first year with DistroKid using the link in the description. We're here in downtown Calgary, Alberta, home of the National Music Centre, Studio Bell, and the Rolling Stones mobile studio. Today, we'll be meeting with Jason Tawkin, the studio's electronics engineer. Let's check it out. Hi, I'm Jason Tawkin. I'm the studio and electronics engineer here at Studio Bell, home of the National Music Centre, and you're watching Learn Audio Engineering. So they're M79 made by the 3M Corporation that you know and love. These were kind of like the cat's meow, the Cadillac of the day. So a Studio Tape machine back in the day would be about $30,000 to $40,000. This was $79,000 in 1973. So adjusted for inflation, that's like $450,000. And there's two of them.
Yeah.
The reason there's two is they're all on a relay for the returns, and the 24 bus feeds both machines at the same time. So as that one's recording, you can prep this one, get the tape ready. You can't just be like, hey guys, can you stop the rock concert? I have to change the tape. Like, that wasn't an option. So basically, you like, if that one's recording, you get this one ready, and then before that one runs out, you hit record on this one, and then on a relay here, I can switch to monitor this tape machine. Wow. And then that one runs out, and then I put a fresh reel on that one, and then we could just go back and forth between the two machines all night. As long as you have a whole bunch of tape, you can record the whole show.
I think this might be the best jingle ever written. Except how do we get more people to listen to it?
Well, DistroKid has a bunch of music marketing tools, and now you can even set up an official artist page on YouTube. Check under Goodies on your DistroKid homepage, then go down to the Special Access tab. Here you'll find the option to create an official artist YouTube channel. Select the artist of your choice, and YouTube will amalgamate any alternative accounts that you may have into one official artist page that will then gain priority in related search results. You'll also gain access to artist-specific tools and analytics. And if you sign up with the link in the description, you get 7% off your first year with DistroKid. Now, ever since I found out that this piece of history lives in Alberta, there's been only one question on my mind. Can I drive the bus? Yeah. So Jason, can you tell me a bit about the history of the bus?
Yeah, well, here we are sitting in the cab of the Rolling Stones mobile recording studio, which is now permanently on exhibition here at Studio Bell, home of the National Music Centre. So we actually had to bring the bus in before the building was actually completed. About 16 months before the building was made, we secretly backed the truck back into here, built a vestibule around it just to protect it from the construction process.
This being used in the UK and around Europe, how did it end up in Calgary, Alberta, of all places?
Well, it's a crazy story, but it was originally conceived by the Rolling Stones tour manager, Ian Stewart, who was originally their keyboard player, but got kicked out of the band. He got, I guess, didn't get kicked out of the group, like he got demoted to tour manager because he owned a van.
Okay, right. So you're still valuable.
But he actually ended up playing on a lot of significant records, like, for example, rock and roll. There's a Led Zeppelin tune called Boogie with Stu.
Yeah.
Stu is the Ian Stewart. Yeah. So Ian Stewart was responsible for kind of getting the band members to the studio, and it became more and more of a hassle the bigger the Stones got later into the 60s. Yeah. So getting everyone to show up at Olympic Studios, which was their kind of main studio for those golden years, was very difficult. And everyone had kind of like a mansion in the English countryside. So what he decided to do was build this concept, which is the control room of Olympic Studios in the back of a truck. And then you could basically roll up to anyone's house, and it was much easier and much more comfortable for the band to record that way. It ended up being like a really important way to make records in that time period. So in the early 70s, they actually turned it into a business where they would rent it out to other bands. And that's where you have this crazy lineage of other bands, like anyone from Bob Marley to the Deep Purple to Led Zeppelin, who used the truck to make seminal albums. And then by the late 70s, early 80s, this truck, it kind of had fallen out of fashion. They were the biggest band in the world. There was more of a push to do, you know, two Studers locked up with a big SSL console, and this kind of fell by the wayside. So the band collectively decided to let go of the truck, and Bill Wyman actually expressed interest in purchasing it from the band. So they let Bill purchase it, and he started this thing called the Ames Project.
Oh, that we see on the side.
And so most people have seen pictures of this truck. It's completely camouflage.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be silver to match the silver Helios, but it was on set at 200 Motels recording the Frank Zappa record and film, and the sun was reflecting into the cameras. So they got all the roadies to go down to the hardware store and paint the bus camouflage so it would hide in the bushes.
Right.
And when they got the truck back, they were like, that's pretty cool, let's leave it that way. Yeah. And then in the early 80s, when it became the Ames Project, there was lots of sponsors involved with that, and that's when they actually painted the truck again to just signify the new era of the truck. So the truck spent most of the 80s driving around the UK, and actually there was a process where you could apply and win basically a week of recording with the truck. So they would come to your little hamlet or your small town in the UK, and they would give you the studio facilities to actually kind of record a demo. And it was Bill Wyman's way of giving back to the music scene, because music had done so much for him in his life. He really wanted to kind of pay it forward.
Absolutely.
Till about the early 90s, that's what it did. In 1992-ish, it went up for auction, and it was sold to a gear dealer, and that gear dealer sold it to an American. And it was put on a ship, came over to the New York, New Jersey area, and that's where this person actually ran it as a business. So in the early 90s, you could call this guy, and the Stones truck would show up and record your show, or if you had a house rented, you could make a record. And they did that for quite a long time, until about the late 90s, early 2000s. And about that time is when computers got fast enough to actually be able to handle multi-track audio recording. So the analog stuff was kind of on the way out, and anyone that had analog stuff kind of offloaded it so they could get 50 or 60 grand for a Pro Tools rig.
Right.
And so there was this little lull in analog history there where we were actually able to capitalize on it. We actually heard about the truck being for sale through Henry Hirsch, a producer who worked with Lenny Kravitz on lots of different records. He originally suggested that Lenny buy the truck, and he was contemplating doing that because he's such a fan of Helios and Led Zeppelin and the Stones and that classic rock tone that you can get from these types of consoles. But logistically, it's a nightmare because it's a truck. It's it's 32 and a half feet, and like the console is literally welded into the frame, and it's such a historic piece that it had to go somewhere important. Our friend David Keane, who used to work for the organization, got wind of it. We actually reached out to a donor. They were actually able to sponsor the purchase, and we acquired it. And David Keane actually attempted to drive this truck from New Jersey to Calgary. And from the stories he tells me, it was a matter of waiting half an hour before there was enough compression in the engine before you could actually drive. Wow. And then when you drove, it was like black smoke out of the tailpipe and like max 50 miles an hour. Yeah. So he made it just outside of Chicago, and before it just kind of blew up and it wouldn't drive anymore. But when we got it here to Calgary, it was a matter of where do you put a truck that has a valuable historic recording console. So we actually had it in storage. And then when we were building this place, we knew that we wanted to incorporate it into the side of the King Eddie so that we could record shows and actually offer it in our studio recording as well.
Cool. Well, maybe we should take a look in the back, and you can give us a tour.
Yeah, there's not much audio engineering happening here other than the cassette deck with a Helios knob on it. But yeah, let's go check out the studio, and I'll show you the real special thing, which is the Helios console.
Awesome. Let's do it. So what's special about this Helios console? What's something about it that's unique?
So the real cool thing about Helios consoles is they were all custom, one of a kind. With other manufacturers of the era, Sound Techniques, Neve, Trident, they had different models and they had a catalog and whatever. So if you called Neve up, they'd say, oh, how many inputs do you want? I recommend, for example, the 8014. That's 16 inputs and usually 4 buses and 8 returns. And the frame was only one size. So if you said, I want 20 inputs, they'd say, well, you can't. You have to go to something bigger like 24 or 32 inputs. Whereas the Helios console would have been completely boutique. So it was originally started by Dick Swittingham, who was the lead technician at Olympic Studios. And he actually trained in electronics at EMI Abbey Road. It's the second Helios that was ever built. In the late 60s, what happened was Chris Blackwell, who was the owner of Island Records, was trying to get time at Olympic Studios, and he couldn't get time at Olympic Studios because it was basically the most popular studio of that time. So he approached Dick and said, hey, I would love if you could build me a desk because I'm going to start Island Studios. And he said, well, I can't really do that. I work for Olympic Studios. There's a conflict of interest. And he basically proposed to him. He said, I'll give you the money. Let's start a new company. And that's where Helios Electronics was born. In order for Dick to get out of his contract with Olympic, they agreed to it, but they said the very first Helios has to go to Olympic Studios. So that's when they built the first Helios, and that was in Studio B at Olympic Studios. And there's pictures of the Rolling Stones using that and whatnot. So this was the very second desk built. And as far as I know, it's the only silver Helios. There's no kind of one model of Helios consoles. They were all built for the studios that they were built for. So you'd say, hey, I want this many inputs, this many buses, and then they would hand build them. So it makes it a very big challenge technically to keep care of it because there is no documentation. They're all different. And there's some documentation about the mic pre's, but that's often not what fails on the desk. There's other, the center section electronics are unique to every single desk. So it's a bit of a one-off kind of thing, but the real magic is the sound. And the whole philosophy with Helios consoles was keeping the electronics out of the way. So minimal electronics and most importantly, minimal transformers. So on a Neve console, each module is transformer in and out. Whereas on this desk, you have a transformer on the input transformer for the mic, and then you basically go through the fader that feeds your bus, and then that bus feeds a mix card, and then a line card feeds a transformer on the bus. So there's 25 inputs, but there's only 24 outputs because we're recording at that era to 24-track tape. So the whole idea was to keep as much of the electronics out of the way because as we know now and we love, transformers color the sound. So back then, they didn't think that was a good thing. They wanted the purest minus kind of, so these are very high fidelity and very clear and open, but with a little bit of that analog vibe. Some people describe them as kind of woody sounding, very great on the mid-range and just like very high open on the top end. These are actually flat to 180K. So they go well above the audio range. That's actually quite important because of the way the nature of sound works, because there's always fundamentals of harmonics above and below. So whenever your audio design incorporates those, it results in a kind of better feeling.
It doesn't just cut it right at 20.
Exactly, because it's cutting all the overtones above it as well. That's kind of my theory as far as the sound is like minimal electronics and transformers, and then a very simple circuit with extended high frequency response.
I got to visit Sennheiser Neumann, their microphone facility, and I got to try some Sennheiser Orpheus headphones. The guy was saying they go down to single digits and they go up to about 100 kilohertz or something.
Right.
And I was like, why? And he said, your ears can't hear it, but your skull cavity can resonate,
Right.
and it'll raise hair on the back of your neck because
Right.
of the higher frequencies or something. So although we can't hear it, it like affects us. And stuff.
We perceive it.
Yeah,
in
we
a certain-
perceive it.
And that's like the perception of value of this console is unreal, and it's really special. And then so you have like top tier technology, and then what's really important is why we get out of bed to make records every day. And usually it's from the records that we've heard previous, right? So we're really influenced by those that have done this before us. And to sit behind the desk that Glenn Johns sat behind, that Andy Johns sat behind, that all of these great producers, Alan Parsons came in to see it, and he was like, wow, yeah, I used it once to record Wings in Belgium, and Paul came into the truck after to listen to the show. So you can imagine Alan Parsons and Paul McCartney are sitting right where we are, and they're listening to their show that they just recorded. And all of those magic records that we know and love, Led Zeppelin 3, Led Zeppelin 4, Deep Purple's Machine Head, they were all listened to for the first time right here. And I feel like as an engineer, as an artist, you can totally tap into that vibe right away. How many studios from 1968 have the original walls? Not a lot. Not a lot. And even it's a miracle that this thing survived, because being a remote truck, it is a smaller format console, right? So it's not 12 feet long. So like if you were to put a Helios console in your bedroom studio, like this is the one you would want. But the problem is it's like literally welded into the truck frame. So it wasn't an easy thing to take out and just remove, which is what my theory of why it actually survived, which is incredible.
Join us in part 2 as Jason explains what makes this mobile studio great and why the Helios console will continue to record music for generations.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Learn Audio Engineering.